It was a nightmare crime. Two 12-year-old girls stabbed their friend 19 times. The motive, a sacrifice to a macabre fictional monster known as Slender Man.
The man was just leaving Walmart when a stranger with a smile on his face smashed him in the head with a hammer.
It's my smile on your face. Now I see the poison. Now I'm always slowly.
Welcome to this episode of The Soul Trap. My name is Joel Tillis, and as always, it is an honor to have you join in with us. We trust that whenever this broadcast finds you, it finds you in good health, good spirits, and most of all, as we always say and always wish for you, on that good and narrow way. We are going to be talking today about some interesting things, some connectivity, as we often do here at The Soul Trap. And we begin our exploration today with a movie called Smile. It is a 2022 horror film that was written and directed by Parker Finn. In the movie, there is a therapist named Rose Cotter who, after witnessing a bizarre suicide of one of her patients, goes through a very disturbing set of experiences, leading her to believe that what she is experiencing is not just psychological or physiological, but is indeed supernatural. There are multiple layers to the film, and I want to be careful because I don't want to give it away and spoil you, but on a clinical level, some critics and some observers have believed and postulated that Rose may be experiencing what is termed vicarious trauma. In other words, vicarious trauma is when a therapist or a clinician experiences trauma as a result of treating their patient's trauma. Almost a spillover, almost sort of a splash over of the person that they're treating getting onto them. And as she treats these patients, that's what some people believe is at the root of this whole thing. Maybe not necessarily supernatural, but a vicarious trauma. On a more metaphorical level, the clinical nature of trauma is seen through the antagonist's monster's process, causing one victim to spread their trauma to other victims. The deeper extent of personal trauma is shown through the multiple endings, which we're not going to give away, that are experienced by Rose as she confronts her more fully revealed past trauma, only to be forced to relive it. Now, as we have often asked here at the Soul Trap and sought to answer, the question is, could life and art be so connected that one produces another? Where did the idea of Smile come from in the mind of Parker Finn and those that are involved in producing it? Could it be that the venue through which the demonic world expresses itself and its doctrine is art? Is it possible that a tulpa can be created through the force and power of film, of mass distribution, of mass imbibing of the story and the energy that it brings into the private lives and the realities of those that take these thoughts and these tulpas back into the quiet solitudes of their home? Is it possible that there are reflectors, that these movies and books and music and experiences are simply reflectors of a dark and sinister reality that is out there? Well, art, in this particular case, may indeed reflect more of a demonic and scary reality than we realize, because the movie Smile may be very directly related to a demonic figure in lore known as the Grinning Man. Nick Redfern, a very famous investigator and an author that we have often referenced here on The Soul Trap, whose books you should have. Of course, we don't agree with every single thing that he writes, but there is some profoundly good investigative material that he does. Well, Nick Redfern seems to think that there is a connection. He states in an article, quote, "There's a smile you never want to see, and it belongs to the sinister Grinning Man." Over the years, more and more creepy characters have surfaced into our world. They include the Slender Man, the Black-Eyed Children, the Shadow People, the Hat Man, the Woman in Black, and more. Probably the most creepy of all, though, is the Grinning Man. Yes, he has a smile, and therein, if I may digress for just a moment from Redfern's writing, therein is where the connection is. Don't forget that Slender Man was connected very profoundly with the Hat Man, and the black-eyed children are deeply connected with the shadow people. One is real and one is not, or are both unreal, or are both real, and we're seeing a simply different, more popularized version of one or the other. So what Nick Redfern is doing is saying there's a lot of creepy figures that have come up, and some of them have been connected deeply with the spirit world. Yes, Nick Redfern writes, this thing has a smile, but it's not the kind of smile you want to see. Indeed, that grinning thing looks like your average deranged axe wielder. It looks almost demonic. And not for nothing, this connection, if you've ever seen the pictures of Momo, you will realize that even that demonic figure seems to bear some kind of a grin. You can't quite put your finger on it, but it feels like it there. Redfern asks, or something even worse could it possibly be showing? With that said, it's best avoided forever. The first case is a fascinating one, because as you'll see, he writes in this story, the Grinning Man has blended in with the Hat Man. These figures are connected. It's a man in black being that appears in shadowy form, not unlike the infamous shadow people, to whom the Hat Man is almost certainly related, even if we're not sure why. On many occasions, however, the Hat Man appears in regular human form, with a black beard and a black suit, wearing a long overcoat or cloak, always black. I know this as I have investigated many such affairs, Nick Redfern writes. Most noticeable about this creepy figure is, of course, his hat. Sometimes it's a fedora, other times it's an old-style top hat. Occasionally it's more like a cowboy hat, but regardless of the kind of headgear, it's always present and always black, and many of the encounters occur while the victim is in a distinct altered state of sleep or somewhere between sleep and awakeness. Now, I think that's very interesting. The Bible actually speaks about God's ability to speak and almost seeming ability to be able to program the human mind and heart during their sleep. There is something unusual about that strange ground, that twilight zone between sleep and awake. In fact, I have had several people share stories with me about experiencing strange occurrences within the odd world between sleep and awake. And I have often wondered if that is not a natural altered state, similar to what we see with alcohol or drugs, if that is not something going on there. Redfern continues his story, however, by bringing us into the encounter of a lady named Angie. Angie, he writes, had just such an encounter in Massachusetts on September 6, 1994. As she told in an interview, her reason for contacting Redfern was due to the fact that, quite out of the blue, she had suddenly begun to dream of the events of 20 years earlier, and dream of them almost every night for weeks. Very much like those people unfortunate enough to be confronted by the somewhat similar Slender Man. Again, notice the connectivity. Slender Man, who some believe is the ultimate internet meme come to life in tulpa form. Redfern writes that Angie was sleeping when the mysterious thing disturbed her sleep by manifesting in her bedroom and staring at her with a menacing grin on its ghoulish face. For a few moments, Angie was unable to move. Now, again, I want you to notice some of the connectivity, not just with scary stories, but notice the connectivity here with alien abduction. Notice that it was at nighttime. Notice that there was this weird awakening. Notice that she could see the face and the figure, but she was not able to see the actual details. And notice that she was unable to move. Paralysis is a very common denominator in almost all abduction cases. I would postulate to you that when it comes to abduction cases, when it comes to these kind of events, that we are not talking about something that's just paranormal. We're actually talking about paradimensional, and probably, and most possibly, even demonic. As she finally broke the spell of paralysis, Redfern writes, the grinning hat man was gone, and so ended the case of Angie. There are multiple comparisons, Redfern writes, between none other than the Slender Man and a figure known as the Indrid Cold, a creepy, endlessly grinning character who appears in John Keel's acclaimed 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. Again, it's fascinating to see how these demonic, scary, frightening figures weave themselves into the UFO world, because John Keel is very, very much known as not just a paranormal investigator, but as a UFO investigator and writer. And of course, he's most famous for his study in the Mothman Prophecies. If you've never read that, you should read that immediately. Essentially, there is, Redfern writes, a connection of creepiness, a shadow dweller, people that are able to move in and out of the shadows of our lives, of our homes, of our kitchens, of our hallways. These are figures that go back in time. Some have even suggested and theorized that the infamous, if not famous, Jack the Ripper was actually a Slender Man, Grinning Man type tulpa that was brought to life, that materialized into the shadowy underworld of a demonic field and area known as Whitechapel, and dematerialized and moved on its way. Perhaps, perhaps not. We'll never know. Perhaps, however, the agenda of the Slender Man is so complex and massive that we fail actually to see the full spectrum. The smiley face angle to all of this is notable, as there are more than a few paranormal entities that sport what can only be termed and terrifying is like maniac-like grins. One, as mentioned already, is Indrid Cold, a sinister man in black type character with an undeniably Dickensian-like name. He roamed around the city of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, when, in the late 1960s, the Mothman affair was at its height. Those who encounter this unsettling entity usually at night, again, note the connectivity, were unable to take their eyes off of this psychotic serial killer-like smile. Again, there is a hypnotic connection. Today, we have a modern-day equivalent of Indrid Cold. He is most appropriately known as the Grinning Man. Imagine Jack Nicholson's insane grinning character. Again, if you want to talk aliens, fake moon landing, you need, and all occult, eyes wide shut, you need go no further than Stanley Kubrick. Well, you've got the Grinning Man, and don't forget the insane grinning character, Redfern writes, of Jack Torrance in Stanley Kubrick's 1980 movie, The Shining.
Here's Johnny!
And so we see that there is this broad spectrum of connectivity, this demonic, paranormal, paradimensional figure that moves in and out of the shadows, in and out of the internet, fascinatingly enough. This being that seems to take on a life of its own, and then just as quickly as it comes, it seems to vanish away, almost like a cocoon, and a metamorphosis through which a paranormal being develops itself, spreads its wings, flies for a while, and then fades away. Redfern continues to talk and to bring us up to speed with some of this connection. He mentions Christine, who grew up in West Texas and was confronted on more than a few occasions by this very Grinning Man. He writes that Christine said, "I haven't told a lot of people about it. When I first saw the person, I was 1 or 2 years old. I have a very long and vivid memory even at that early age. It was like the typical thing that you hear. It was this man who would stand in the doorway of my bedroom. I remember standing up in my crib and holding onto the bars, and he wore a fedora, a tan raincoat, black trousers, shiny shoes, and black leather gloves. His face was like someone who had been burned, and he just stood there and would grin. There was nothing friendly about the way he was grinning. It was horrible," she stated. "Emotionless. He didn't blink. And he came off and on for years. Even as I got older and slept in my own bed, I would wake up sometimes, usually around 3 o'clock in the morning, the hour of souls. That still happens. All of a sudden, I'll be wide awake at 3 in the morning for no apparent reason. But as a kid, I'd wake up at 3 and he would be there. I didn't have any frame of reference for it. Of course, my mom didn't believe me. She just thought that I was dreaming. Was she? Was she dreaming? Was she alert? Was she lucid dreaming? Was there really a being there in her room? And if so, one must beg this question be answered. How many millions and millions and millions and millions of people are experiencing these kind of things, yet they never come forward? They don't want to be thought of the way some of you are probably thinking of Christine. Christine continued her story to Redfern. She states, but there were all sorts of strange paranormal things that happened throughout my childhood, and I wonder if it was all part of the same thing. I even got weird phone calls as a teenager. The phone would ring, and it sounded like a little kid speaking in another language, just rapidly talking into the phone. I thought at the time it was some little kid that got on a payphone and started dialing numbers from another country, but when I read the Mothman prophecies, I realized this was the same thing. What kind of validated that this person was real was that when I was 12, a friend and I were out riding our bikes at 9:30 at night in the summer. It was a small town in West Texas. We stopped and were looking in the doors of a Baptist church as they had just put in new carpets. A big Saturday night for a small West Texas town. But we both turned at the same time to look behind us, and this man appeared to be right on the edge of the streetlight and started walking to us. And he was wearing the exact same outfit that I had seen as a young child in my room. The fedora, the tan overcoat, the black pants, but this time his whole head and hands were bandaged. We didn't speak and we didn't stick around. We just took off like a shot around the corner to her house. We didn't know what to make of it, but I thought it was probably the same person that I used to see. I've never seen him again. When I got into my early 20s, I was living in Dallas and I met a girl who got to talking about paranormal stuff. She lived in Lufkin in East Texas. She said that she and her sister shared a room and that sometimes she would wake up and there would be this man in her room. She said he wore a hat and a long coat. He reminded her almost of the Hamburglar.
But then,
And he would just stand there, grinning sinisterly at her. One night she woke up and he was looking at her, but he was actually petting her sister's head while she slept. And then a few years later, another friend of mine who had grown up in New York, she had seen a similar man, and this man would stand in her room in the middle of the night. And I thought, okay, that's great. I'm not nuts. I'm not alone. I had lights that would turn on and turn off. My stuff got moved all around all the time. I still have my things get moved around. Pictures would come off the wall. I had a poster of Marilyn Monroe that actually jumped off the wall. It was like 6 o'clock and I was 16 years of age, and out of nowhere it just flew off the wall and into the middle of the floor. I grew up in a really religious family, so that all of this was always in my mind thought of as the devil. But now I don't know what to think of it. It gets very creepy, she states. There was another visible entity that used to show up. It was black, sort of shapeless, but had these enormous eyes, kind of like the quintessential way we depict aliens. The great big eyes, but they were silver with no pupil. They had a reflective quality. Again, it would be 3 o'clock in the morning and I would feel my bed jolt. And I would look down and see those eyes right over the edge of my bed and the black shapelessness around it. I want to digress here for just a minute and say that what's interesting, and one of the things that has always spurred the Soul Trap from the beginning is the connectivity of the whole thing. I remember years ago counseling a particular person, and without getting into the details of it, this person was talking to me and telling me that one night they went to bed, and they went to bed before their spouse. Their spouse was involved in things that would open doorways up to the spirit world. And later in the evening, probably around 2 or possibly 3 o'clock in the morning, the spouse came to bed, laid down, and it kind of jolted this person that was already laying in bed. They rolled over a little bit and could reach over and look and see the spouse lying next to them. But then they kind of cleared their eyes a little bit and looked again. And at the edge of the bed, on the banister, the person told me with tears in their eyes and sincerity in their heart that there was a black figure, a being, perched on the bed with large eyes. Even though it was black, there was the same reflective nature of the eyes, nothing else, but black eyes on a black figure staring and peering down into this person. The person panicked, jumped up, and as they did, this figure almost dematerialized into the spouse lying next. Are these dreams, or is there something deeper and more sinister to the world in which we live? The truth is, whether or not you're a Christian, the Bible tells you that this is a reality. We have oft quoted it here at the Soul Trap. But in the epistle of Ephesians chapter 6, it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The Bible is very, very clear that this is a reality. In fact, it states, and let me quote it for you directly here, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. What is Redfern writing about here? What is going on with the Grinning Man? What is the smile and the source behind it? It is not just fanciful imagination. It is more than a bump in the night. It is a being in the night. Now back to our story. Redfern is talking about this lady here that says, I would look down and see those eyes right over the edge of my bed, the black shapelessness around it. I turned the light on once and got up the courage when I did it. I thought, if I don't move, it's going to kill me. And if I do move, it's going to kill me, so I better do something. Again, I was 16 or 17. I screamed for my mom. I told her I had a nightmare. But then I saw it again. One morning I was getting ready to go to school, and I turned toward the shower and could see the eyes looking between the hooks on the shower curtain. You know, have you ever had that experience? Have you ever had that experience where you're walking through your home and you felt like you saw something out of the corner of your eye? Have you ever had that experience where you feel like you're not alone? The final time this thing ever happened, she stated, the final time it ever appeared, I didn't actually see it. I had a friend sleeping over, a senior in high school. She had never been to my house, and I had never told her about any of this kind of stuff, this paranormal activity. She, likewise, was very religious, didn't believe in any of this, or would have said it was just simply the devil. We're up the next morning, and she was helping me make my bed, and we were getting ready for school. And I said, it was a lot of fun. You should come back over. She looked at me with fear in her eyes and said, I'm sorry. I'm never going to come back here again. Try as I may, something happened during the night to which she would never come back. Redfern writes, Christine's final words on this issue are, quote, I said, what did I do? She said, you didn't do anything. How do you not remember? I said, I really don't know what you're talking about. You'll have to tell me. She said she woke up suddenly during the night and she thought that she couldn't see. Then when her eyes adjusted, there was a face so close to hers that she couldn't see anything else. I asked her what it looked like, and she said the same thing. These big eyes and just blackness. She said she screamed so loud she figured she woke the whole neighborhood. All I did, according to her, was lift up and sit up on my elbow and look at her and said, "Are you okay?" She said she was and went back to sleep. My mom didn't hear it either, and surely enough, she never came back to my house. One other strange thing she mentions, which is fascinating. Christine states, "I did have a person who would call me and talk to me while I was in high school. It may have just been some nut, but he seemed to know everywhere that I went. I took dance classes in Abilene, and I had friends that lived there as well, and this person would call late at night and ask, 'How was your dance class?' He knew my every move, which was odd. They wouldn't tell me who they were. They knew a week's worth of my activities. I might have decided to see a friend and not had those plans prior, so no one would know where I was going, but this person knew where I had been. The last time I saw him was in a dream when I was 13, and it was like a lucid dream. And I was in a store looking at a rack of magazines, and I turned and looked to my left, and there he was. He's got a magazine in his hand and staring right at me and grinning. And in the dream, I put my magazine down and walked right past him and told him, 'Don't ever come here again,' and he never did. That was the last time I saw him physically or in a dream. I decided right there I had to try to put a stop to it." What was she experiencing? What was she seeing? What happened there in Point Pleasant with the Mothman prophecies? What is going on with Momo and Grinning Man, the Hat Man, the Slender Man, and Smile? What are we saying and what are we experiencing? Not just those that come forward, but the countless millions that are out there in the darkness, in the shadow of their own confusion and their own fear. I think what we are saying, and have often said, is that in essence there are two worlds running side by side. Two worlds that frame reality. One, clear to see. It is a life that you and I live every single day in the light of day. The other, however, is there beside us, with us, all of the time. But it is a dark world, a world of shadows and whispers, of chills and premonitions. A world where deep in the darkness, if you look long enough, you can see it. Barely at first, then clearly, a face staring back at you, a smile from the other side that says, "We're here. Nay, we have always been here, and we're coming closer."
911, what is your emergency?
Someone called me and my brother home from school. My parents are not home.
Have you seen this person before?
No. Can you please send help?
Where are you now?
At home, in the living room. I'm looking out the front window. The tall man is scaring us.
Where is this guy?
In front of the house.
What is he doing?
He's standing behind a tree. He's very tall. Help us. I'm scared.
What was that?
I don't know. The lights went out. I'm scared.
Help is on the way.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
What's happening?
He's looking at me. He has no face. His face is gone.
Calm down. Does he have a mask on?
No. He's coming. He's coming.
Calm down. Help is on the way. As long as he's outside and you're inside, you'll be fine. Describe him to me.
He has a suit on and a tie. He's very tall. He has long arms. He's bald. I'm scared.
Keep praying, okay? I want you to be strong right now. It's going to be fine. I'm here with you. How's your brother doing?
He's not doing anything. He's acting strange.
What is he doing?
Staring. He's staring at me.
Is he scared?
No, he's not saying anything.
How old is he?
9.
What is the tall man doing now? What's the matter?
He's in front of the window, facing me.
Back away from the window, get your brother, go into the restroom, and lock the door. Young lady, are you okay? Hello? Are you there? Hello? Young lady, are you okay?
I'm fine now. I'm not scared anymore. The tall man just wants to play. He's my friend.
Where is he? They're with me now. They're safe. Who are you? She will be missed. Sir, please don't do this.
Welcome to this episode of the Troll.